This step-by-step tutorial will show you the basics of making an indoor mosaic. If you love learning about art, hit that subscribe button so you never miss a tutorial, and find me on Instagram and TikTok to see what my students are up to in my classroom. As far as materials, you are going to need tile nippers to cut your pieces of glass into the sizes you need them. You're also going to need tessera, or small pieces of glass, to create your mosaic, and you will need a surface to work on. A primed piece of wood is my favorite surface to use because they're just easy to come by. You can buy large packs of tessera, you can buy them on Amazon, you can buy them on art supply websites, you can even get scraps of glass from stained glass artists, and you can get them in different color shapes. I'm also using this glue adhesive. It is specific for mosaics and it's excellent. I'm going to start with a very simple design, and I'm using a circle to give myself a challenge because this is a square, so I'm playing around kind of with a hard edge and then also curved edges. Using your tile nippers, I always prepare mini tiles in advance, and wearing goggles is important because you're cutting shards of glass, but if you use a bag, the glass will be contained in one area and it won't fly across the room. I'm using mostly little triangular pieces here, and again, I'm working very, very small. Think about it like a puzzle. You want to work just a small section at a time, and you want to be organized with your color scheme. I'm doing a very simple warm and cool, kind of like the sun versus the sky or the ocean, and edges and corners are the most important. So you're going to kind of pre-plan it, but also if you pre-plan too much of it, things change as you glue things down. So it's best to work on like a small edge at a time. And the negative space relationship is very important too. So you want to make sure there's enough space in between the tiles that is even and consistent, and that grout can get in between. More on grout later, but not too much of a gap where the grout can't build up. So it really is a fine line of how much distance between each one. You also want to make sure that the glue does not come between the tiles. If the glue comes out and is taller than the tile or as tall as the tile, then when you put the grout in the section, it won't actually stick. So you do want to use enough glue. It is a flat surface, but you're using enough glue that the tiles can be stuck there, but you're also not using so much that it's glooping and glopping in between the negative space. And then you're just figuring out your color scheme, building, going around your edges. And it's very important, like you saw me do, to plan your design before you start. And I'm not using any found objects or anything like that, but that is a fun twist. You can use clear glass to collage over photographs. You can glue down pretty much any found objects, seashells, coins. My students have done it all using this glue. This glue is excellent. And you can see I'm sticking mostly with geometric shapes, so a variety of kind of like diamond shapes, triangles, squares, and notice they're all very similar in size. So the movement of your pieces, the way they interact with each other, is also very important. And it's one of those things where you kind of get the hang of it as you go. And you can see the glue dries pretty quickly. You do kind of like push it around with your fingers. Another thing you can do if you don't want your fingers to get too messy is to use the edge of a paintbrush or a long shish kebab stick, or even a needle tool you use with clay to push your pieces around. And you can see I haven't done my circle yet, but I'm thinking the edges of the circle, and any edge like a 90-degree angle in a corner or following around a circular shape, those need to be more thoughtful. And yes, you can cut smaller pieces, just, if you don't like how it looks, you can remove them. I also like to organize by color, so you can see I have used my tile nippers to cut these into similar shapes. And with this, I'm using my warm colors, so I'm thinking my oranges, my yellows, and I think that'll contrast very nicely with the other shapes. I do think the circle is going to be more of a challenge, which is why I didn't do it first. And you can see the shish kebab stick is helping me not use my fingers to push the tiny pieces into place, because even the smallest pieces, the negative space in between each one needs to be consistent. And you need to consider, when you add your grout, how is the grout going to have a space in between? So I'm kind of laying some shapes in there and then pushing them around. And I do want these to go kind of in a circular motion. The direction of your tiles can really help your artwork look alive, and it can really give a lot of movement and directional energy to your work of art. And this is coming together nicely. And again, I'm working very small, so this is not taking me that long. This is an indoor artwork. You could do a similar technique on stepping stones that you put outside. Just make sure if you're doing something outdoor that you are reading all of your directions and you are using outdoor safe glue. This is for indoor mosaics, so for decoration. And then just make sure your materials match the environment where they will be living. So now I'm finishing up, and that's sometimes the hardest thing is to get those smaller pieces, but you can always use your tile nipper and just clip and make smaller shapes. So those relationships, those edges are really important. So I'm putting some pieces in there and then kind of fidgeting with them and pushing them around. And you can see I removed my top corner here because I wasn't happy with the color blend. And now before it sets, and it does have a good 20-minute set time, I'm just making sure that everything is exactly where I want it. The sun shape is a little tight, but there is negative space for the grout. Okay, speaking of grouting, I have mixed my grout and here. Definitely wear a mask while mixing. There are 3 different color options my students are getting: black, gray, and white, and you can mix small, tiny amounts, or you can mix the whole thing. And I'm using this tiny plastic spatula that I purchased to apply the grout. With grout, it's always 3 parts grout to 1 part water, and I have this pre-mixed, and I'm taking my spatula here, and I am applying it on a surface that's covered because grout is concrete. And you know your consistency is right when your grout is about the consistency. It's not too thin, it's not too liquidy, so kind of like cake batter if you've ever cooked. And then it is scary because at this point, all your beautiful tile and all of your hard work just looks like it disappeared, but you do want to cover the whole thing. And since I'm working so small and all of my pieces are perfectly flat, I didn't add anything that's like different than the pieces I just bought online. It's going to be easier to clean. So you have to trust the process. You are doing grout, which is concrete, but I promise that it will come off as it sets. So grout, it needs about 15 to 20 minutes to set. So you can see I am just kind of scraping my spatula over the grout here. And then once you've done that, you can then feel as it sets, but about 20 minutes later, I'm taking the same spatula and I'm just scraping the more dried pieces off of it. If you do this in a classroom setting, make sure you give yourself enough time. It's best to pre-mix the grout. I used to have my students mix it day of, and then by the time they were actually doing this step, we were rushing because we only have 45-minute class periods. So once it's set, you can take a dry cloth and then remove the excess, and you can see it is buffing up just fine. If you start to use the dry cloth and it pulls the grout out of the cracks and crevices, it's too soon, so just kind of wait. And you can see that it's kind of, as I'm using the rag, you see those pieces, the dry pieces flicking off of it. That's a sign that it's time to clean it. If it's still too wet, that won't happen. And look how well it cleans already. It is very normal for it to be hazy the first day, so it does have to cure for 24 hours, and then you can clean it with a wet rag. You can also use a sponge. So if you use cleaner before it sets, you're just pulling the grout before it sets in there. So you do want to give it a good 24 hours. So if you're doing this in the classroom, you would clean it the next day, and it is normal for it to appear hazy. Students are always concerned that it's going to look like that forever, but nope, it will clean up just fine with a rag. And I always do a damp rag or sponge first, and then go over and dry buff it with a dry rag. So that is the basics of how to make a mosaic for indoor use. If you are interested in more tutorials, check these out. Thank you so much for sticking around and making art with me. And if you're interested in more art tutorials, lesson plans, and student examples, find my website, thatartteacher.com.